Okay. All right. I think we're on. Let me
Am I
make
on?
an adjustment. You're on.
Okay.
We've got 0 viewers, so it looks like it's just us right now. Okay, it was off here. All right, welcome to Say It Loud, Random Slabs of Music History, the show where each week my guests and I talk about a different random piece of music history. I'm your host, John Terry. Tonight's topic, Blaxploitation and the Ghetto Narrative. And tonight I'm happy to welcome my first guest, Melissa Seifert. Hello, welcome to the program.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
All right, so tonight's show, what do I mean about the ghetto narrative? Oh, man. Make sure that we're broadcasting. All right.
Maybe.
I'm gonna assume that we're going. Okay, so what is the ghetto narrative? Now, this is a new story about black life that emerges out of the 1960s. So the rural blues are often about hardship, and many of the songs talked about how bad it was in the city. By the late 1960s, the story is emerging in funk and jazz and R&B and soul, a different kind of story, different than what the blues were doing. And so a lot of this story, this is the ghetto narrative that I'm talking about. A lot of the story is based on events that happened in the 1960s. So what's happening in the 60s? You've got riots. You have many activists and civil rights leaders who are in jail or killed, unemployment, drugs, all sorts of problems that are legitimately and genuinely facing the black community coming out of the 60s, and also the frustration of failed civil rights legislation. So out of this new experience, and then decades before that of civil rights activism, all these themes start to get reflected in a new kind of music in a way that the blues never could do it. So the blues was about trouble, and they criticized really specific things like politics, factory work, city life, all sorts of different things, but they're usually this individual tale, and it's always about a material problem, some problem that's facing the individual performer. But this new narrative that's emerging in soul and R&B and funk, and later we see it much more so in hip-hop, there's plenty of individual tales, but you also get a picture of new conditions, and the emphasis becomes this community-wide conditions rather than the troubles that one person is facing. So if the blues gives us a picture of sharecropping in Mississippi, R&B, soul, funk, later hip-hop, this gives us an idea of black life in the city. But there's a problem here. This is one kind of story. So oftentimes these songs, even though they'll praise black leaders, black power, black pride, and can seem positive in many ways, they sometimes create a completely negative vision of black neighborhoods or ghettos, right? This ghetto narrative. So not all of the music does this at all. And there's some positive stuff, and there's plenty of black power songs we could talk about. But many big performers have really successful songs about black life that paint negative pictures. You got James Brown, Isaac Hayes, Marvin Gaye, Curtis Mayfield. Even though there's this element of hopefulness, there seems to be this picture of hopelessness in these neighborhoods. So tonight we're just going to focus on this ghetto narrative. We're not going to really talk about the positive stuff, but I think that there's enough of these songs here to merit this kind of conversation. So what's the ghetto narrative? You've got drugs, prostitution, crime, violence, alcoholism, destitution, crummy buildings, crummy services. All these things fit this narrative. And there's a sense that the place is a ghetto in the literal sense, as in a blocked off, completely separate, all black community, which is seldom true. And there's also a sense of danger and a sense of hopelessness, even if the characters in the songs and the individuals can have a hopeful outlook. There's a sense that the neighborhood itself is hopeless. And you can see this clearest in the visual embodiment of the ghetto narrative in a new type of film that comes out in the late 1960s and the early 1970s. So listening to the music of blaxploitation really shows us this ghetto narrative, and hip-hop I'll save for a different program. So tonight's guest, Melissa, how are you?
I'm doing well, John. Thanks a lot. How are you?
I'm doing good. Well, thanks for coming on, my first guest, and I keep saying my guests. So I should have one on if I'm going to keep on saying that. So tell us, what exactly is blaxploitation cinema, Melissa?
Well, John, it actually derives from the term exploitation, and so the idea of exploiting a certain audience. And so the idea is that black folks were being exploited through these films by their white producers in a way. So that being said, so I guess you can think of it as like the plots and the casts were usually largely black casts, and then they usually, especially some of the later films, had white producers who funded them, and so that's where the term blaxploitation comes from. But I guess that being said, a lot of prominent scholars have talked about blaxploitation and have actually defined it, and so they define it as a set of low-budget sort of action-adventure films created between 1969 and 1975, and this is very rough dates, which are usually set in sensationalized ghetto environments with a mostly black cast. And so that's like our definition. A lot of, and I guess this is like the earlier films are a lot like this. The later, there's like a shift in like 73, where the films start to turn into like women become important in the film. So we'll talk about that shift hopefully a little later. But typically what I've found is that there are usually about 4 commonalities with all the early films, especially.
Let's have them.
These early blaxploitation films. So the first, and this is, these are like the male-dominated films, because later on women begin to dominate these, or it's questionable whether or not they actually do. But so the first thing is they usually feature a socially and politically conscious black hero, and he's usually a male, especially in the early films. The second thing that we see is that he usually works alone. So he's got friends and stuff, but he works alone in his revolutionary way. And then third, he's always hypersexualized and usually has multiple partners simultaneously throughout the film.
So now tell me, is this the stereotype of the super spade that you're describing?
Yes, I think so. And so then there's like the question of like getting away from stereotypes with these films, but then they're reinforcing a lot of stereotypes in different ways.
Out with the old stereotype, in with the new stereotype.
Yeah, right. And the fourth one that comes across is that this hero always usually attacks individuals instead of like larger institutions as forms of his oppression. So that's sort of like what's happening here. But then in terms of, so we can think of like Superfly and Dolomite, Shaft, Sweetback's Badass Song. These are a lot of the earlier male-dominated, male protagonist films. And then later films like Coffee, Foxy Brown, Cleopatra Jones, Friday Foster, Sheba Baby. So all of these are sort of the later ones, and you'll notice the shift, and they become women's names. So we'll talk maybe more about that hopefully later. But usually the narrative focuses on problems within the black community and the ghetto. So you're talking about this ghetto narrative, and it's completely visible in these films. So it's usually addressing problems that happen in the ghetto within these communities. So very community and local based. However, some of the films do address like global problems, like global drug trafficking, but so usually they deal with local drug trafficking, prostitution, police brutality, police corruption, these types of things. And it's always like this message that's kind of like we're rising up against the man, like a very empowering image in terms of like what we've seen black people take, the roles that we've seen black people in up to this point. This is very different. And the television set's becoming commonplace in the 60s, so there's this increased visuality, there's a new pride in Afrocentrism, black empowerment, black is beautiful is also at this time, there's a rise in black consciousness. So these films in a lot of ways provided a new image of blackness on the screen, so we're no longer seeing Aunt Jemimas and Uncle Toms and Sambos and Mammies, and the list goes on. So that's sort of what's happening there.
Okay, so that's what it is. Now, I heard you say black consciousness, so you're sort of alluding to the impact. So why don't you tell me why are these films important, and what is the message of some of these films, at least? So what's the impact? What's the message? Why are these important? Why should we care about what blaxploitation is?
Well, John, so as I said earlier, these films, like, they become signifiers of a new image of blackness. So we're seeing these powerful, militant black men and black women who act as heroes and heroines. And that's a very different image than we're used to seeing, right? And that they were used to, black people were used to seeing of themselves. And so that in itself is very empowering just to see that shift. And I guess so there's this new individuality. Like these characters actually, they're no longer depending on someone else. They're independent, so there's this new black individuality, and ultimately black power comes through these films too, and this is like at the time of Black Power movement, and so we could talk about all these different Black Power groups, Black nationalist groups within the context. So people are, and most of the audience for these films were young black men, and so the rhetoric that they're getting, like sort of out on the street, the Black Power rhetoric is saying, you know, like, empower yourself, all this kind of stuff. And so they're seeing this in films too, and so it's a really great overlap and like a great visualization of the rhetoric that's happening at the time.
All right, tell me a little something about the audience. You say young black men, but we see the profit margins, right? I mean, these are really small investments, and they make, you know, they're not making a ton of money, but the profit margin is gigantic. Says to me that something about, you know, this audience has to be more than just these young black men. So do you know anything about who is actually watching the pictures?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a question that I haven't, I guess I don't know. I can't really say the answer. You'd have to find some sort of statistics about that. But I guess from what I've read, it's largely young black men because they're the ones who are targeted. So like the directors and writers are creating their stories and plots and hiring actors that they know that a young black audience will identify with. So that's why the stories are always in the ghetto, having to do with problems that actually do exist, but obviously they exaggerate them to craziness. But so it's there. But then you also brought up like, well, is anyone else watching? I think definitely, but I don't know enough about that. But it seems like such high profits couldn't have just been just the black community. So I'm sure white people were watching. I'm sure women were watching too. But the plots and like the messages that are coming across, especially in the early blaxploitation films, are very male dominated.
All right. So also, you know, where would these theaters be? Are these just playing at theaters that are in black neighborhoods? Does that explain some of the audience? I mean, is that part of the targeting as well? Yeah, and so at this time, there's like mass ghettoization, and so a lot of ghettos have like a old movie theater in them, you know, and so this space these are like theaters that used to be used by a wealthy white crowd before populations mobilized. But so there's like these open spaces that were vacant that became used at this time again. I guess maybe I don't know if I'm not sure about how the extent to which they were vacant, but they're being used for this kind of thing, and because of their locale, they're super accessible for the ghetto audience. So they're right there, and they're pretty cheap too. So I think that has a lot to do with it too. Okay, so you talked a little bit about who's watching, which says something about the impact and something about the audience. So what's the message? And I don't know if there's a way you can come up with an average message, but give me an idea of some of the messages in these songs, in these movies. I'm sorry. Well, you know, this is a tough question because there's sort of like a gendered like there's a dual message, and it's gendered, and because the earlier films that feature male protagonists have a certain message, and the later films that feature female protagonists have a different message. And so, like, for example, the earlier films with the men are usually they're kind of like reaching out to the audience, knowing that it's going to be a young black audience, like the next revolution, the next generation of revolutionaries potentially are watching. And so it's like, actually Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song ends with like text on the screen that's calling out to the audience and saying like, watch out, you know, like this, the black community is going to come get you or something like that. And so they're that kind of message that like
leave it up to the viewer to like continue the struggle. But then a lot of the films that feature women sort of wrap up in the end, and like the bad guy's killed and everything's okay. And that's sort of like all the problems in the ghetto community will be fine because Cleopatra Jones killed the drug lord.
Kill a drug dealer, kill the bad guy, and everything's okay.
So there's like a mixed message. I mean, there on one hand, there's like a message to like go out, like revolutionize in a way, and like fight the oppressor. And for women, there's like, I guess that it's at least empowering to see a woman who's not, like the earlier films, blaxploitation films where men are the protagonists, still utilize women pretty much strictly as bitches or hoes. That's like the way that women are conceived in those films. And then like in 1973, when Pam Grier and Tamara Dobson enter into the blaxploitation scene, they start dominating the genre, but they not only act, so there's like a paradox because they not only act as like these really masculinized gun-toting heroines, they're also like sex objects who appear naked in the films multiple times. And I shouldn't say that about Cleopatra Jones because she doesn't. She's the exception.
So there's a dual role.
Yes.
And this kind of creates this one. It also puts up the impossible standard for women, right? You have to be sensual and beautiful, but you also have to be able to kick everyone on the block's ass at the same time, right? Okay, so we've got some of this about the message. So it sounds like there's this duality. There's messages there, but they're sort of narrow, and it's a certain kind of message that might be empowering, but could also be sort of dangerous. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, should we listen to some music? I will continue.
No, go ahead.
Give me that last line. All right, we're going to come back. Melissa's going to say a little bit more about this. We're going to start out with Sweet Sweetback's theme. And now this is, here's an auteur if we've ever had one, right? So this challenges even the classification of blaxploitation on some levels. But Melvin Van Peebles, 1971, he wrote, directed, produced, and wrote the score and starred in Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, and a band that was little known at the time, 1971, Earth, Wind, and Fire performs Sweet Sweetback's theme. So we're going to play that from 1971, written by Melvin Van Peebles, performed by Earth, Wind, and Fire, also on the Stax label, Sweet Sweetback's theme. Taste. Earth, Wind, and Fire playing Sweet Sweetback's theme. And I only cut that off because it's about a 10-minute song, and you get the idea. But one of the things that it's doing is it is kind of emulating a kind of jazz or something interesting happening in jazz at the time, is that in order for black artists to progress, they start to look back to Africa in a way to sort of take back some of the things that they had felt that white performers had maybe not necessarily robbed, but had co-opted on some level. So you got this turn in jazz, and Van Peebles is definitely aware of that and playing to that. So that's his composition. We'll get into the lyrical songs that I think say something a little bit more interesting. But Sweet Sweetback, it sets a tone. One, because it's the first widely recognized, it's the beginning of the genre on some levels, even though there are other movies that you can make that argument for. But it sets a tone, even though it's just an instrumental. It introduces some of these elements that are becoming part of, more important parts of black culture. And, we've got a guy who wrote and produced and directed this film and scored it. So it's a very very intentional thing. And he also, this is the film that establishes, and Melissa was talking about this sort of stud hustler character, and that is Sweetback. And he sets a pattern for a lot of the characters that came after him. And probably one of the most famous characters would be Shaft. And now here's a really interesting album. This is and I was surprised to find this out, the biggest selling record of all time for Stax Records was the Shaft soundtrack by Isaac Hayes. And so you'll hear him describing this character, and it's got a nice long musical break, and this is playing in the beginning of the scene. So listen to what kind of character that Isaac Hayes is describing. And it's also interesting to note that Isaac Hayes wanted the part, so he wrote this song thinking that he had a chance at getting the lead role in the movie. But see how he describes the character. It's about making love indiscriminately, being tough, but also his woman's the only one who understands him. There's all these contradictions built in. So we'll listen to the theme from Shaft, a rather famous song that I'm sure many of us have heard, and we'll come back.
That's a sex machine to all the chicks. You're damn right. Who is the man that would risk his neck for his brother, man? Can you dig it? Who's the cat that won't pop out when there's danger all about? Right on. You see, this cat chef is a bad mother.
Shut your mouth.
What I'm talking about, Chef?
Then we can do it.
He's a complicated man, but no one understands him but his woman.
John Jack.
on Shaft. A beautiful tune there. Okay, so we just listened to the 1971 track Shaft. So this is Isaac Hayes' most famous work. Like I said, Stax's biggest selling record of all time. Won a Grammy, 60 weeks on the chart, peaked at number 1. It was 16 weeks number 1 R&B hit. So these are huge. And actually Shaft is a big movie. MGM, this is MGM. A big movie, they make a lot of money, but after this, and after the album's success, you know, Sweet Sweetback is really controversial. Shaft is not so controversial, and after its success, many other people wanted to get on board, so the funk and soul soundtrack becomes like the requisite soundtrack of all blaxploitation. But Shaft was sort of a good guy. He's the private detective, and you hear how tough and big and strong he is, right? And that's sort of the point of the song, and it's a private eye film. So Shaft is the good guy, but now we look to this other character. Melissa was talking about this. Superfly is another movie from 1973. A different kind of character, and this is Curtis Mayfield's soundtrack for the anti-hero. This is an important part of the ghetto narrative, the idea that the pimp and the pusher and the hustler, the criminal, is someone who's reacting to this system. So they're the super spade stereotype, they're the anti-hero hero. It's kind of glamorizing the pimp and pusher. Mm-hmm. And really Curtis Mayfield is really interesting because he's really critical of that, and in songs show that. So I'm going to play the title track from Superfly, and you can hear that he's a little bit critical of this, and yet the movie glamorizes this. So this is 1972 Superfly, and this is another big hit. He had 2 million sellers on the album. They peaked at 4 and 8 on the charts respectively. Freddy's Dead and the Superfly theme I'm going to play in a second, and the soundtrack outgrossed the movie actually. So there was more money made on the soundtrack than there was on the film. And like I said, it's critical, but it's also painting the same picture that this is a scary place to be, where Superfly lives. And where does Superfly live? In any black neighborhood. So the critique is kind of lost in the fact that the film has the triumphant anti-hero. But we're going to listen to Superfly by Curtis Mayfield, 1972.
But the time's running out and
1972. So there you get the portrait of the anti-hero, the drug dealer, pimp, and pusher. And you can hear that Curtis Mayfield is somewhat critical, but here's the movie that is glorifying it. And now there's a few people who were trying to get in on this train. Curtis Mayfield is a huge record. Isaac Hayes already had a huge record off these blaxploitation soundtracks. So one of the last people to really get in while the getting was good was Bobby Womack, and this song peaked at 19 on the popular charts in 1973, Across 110th Street. Now this film, some people wouldn't necessarily lump in with blaxploitation films, but I think there's enough reason to actually make that case. So here we're going to get another, now this is moving beyond the hero, right? You've got Shaft, the good guy, you've got Superfly, the anti-hero. Now you've got Bobby Womack, and what he's doing is painting a picture, and he does such a good job of this that later, a blaxploitation fan himself, Quentin Tarantino uses this film uses this for the soundtrack of Jackie Brown, and this is also, if anybody's seen American Gangster in 2007, is on the soundtrack. And I think that it makes it onto those other soundtracks because it paints this particular picture, whether it's real or not, that people wanted in the film. So, and like I said, this peaks at 19 and 73. This is where you get this, you get the feel for the environment. It's not about the hero, it's about the environment. So I'm going to play Bobby Womack's Across 110th Street.
Brother of five, doing whatever I had to do to survive. I'm not saying what I did was alright. Trying to break out of the ghetto was a day-to-day fight. Being down so long, getting up didn't cross my mind. But I knew there was a better way of life, and I was just trying to find. You don't know what you do till you put under pressure. Across 110th Street is a hell of a tester. Across 110th Street, pimps trying to catch a woman that's weak. Across 110th Street, pushers won't let the junkie go free. Across 110th Street, woman trying to catch a trick on the street. Ooh, baby. Across 110th Street, you can find it all in the street. I got one more thing I'd like to talk to you about right now. Hey brother, there's a better way out. Snorting that coke, shooting that dope, man, you're copping out. Take my advice, it's either live or die. You got to be strong if you wanna survive. The family on the upper side of town will catch hell without a ghetto around. In every city you'll find the same thing going down. Harlem is the capital of every ghetto town. Help me sing it. Across 110th Street, pimps trying to catch a woman that's weak. Across 110th Street, wishes won't let the junkie go free. Oh, across 110th Street, a woman trying to catch a trick on the street. Ooh, baby. Across 110th Street, you can find it.
Bobby Womack playing Across 110th Street, the title song to the movie of the same name. And now there is a mad rush. We get to the saturation point already in about 1973. The movie Coffee. Now we're getting into different sort of territory, and I'm going to play this song first, and then I'm going to ask Melissa a question about this. So it's Roy Ayers, and there's still some cachet here. This actually reaches number 31 on the jazz charts. So there's still some popularity, but we're reaching a point of saturation, reaching the point where these things become sort of so self-referential and so derivative that they kind of start to lose a little bit of their edge, even if the quality is still there. But now listen to these lyrics. So when we're shifting this song to the female with the films with the female lead, we get a whole new description, and this is this other element. How do women fit into the ghetto narrative? And really, the entire song is about the color of Coffee's skin, and we're going to take a listen to Coffee is the Color, Roy Ayers from 1973. And I'm going to go right into another example here, and then we're going to ask Melissa. Now, this is from Cleopatra Jones, 1973. So you see, one thing is all these movies are coming out at the same time. And this is and another thing that you notice is men are writing the soundtracks, even when women are the stars. And so we're going to listen to the theme from Cleopatra Jones. That actually lyrically is a little bit more interesting, I think. And then I'm going to ask Melissa a question of that. So here's Joe Simon. And this is the point where the saturation in the music and the film starts to take a little bit of a toll on the profits too. So things are changing. Here's Joe Simon playing the theme from Cleopatra Jones in 1973. All right, there's Joe Simon, the theme from Cleopatra Jones. Now, we get a different sort of lyrical taste there, and it's sort of a strange male fantasy, touch me like the desert wind. And you can see that this woman who's got to be a trained killer, but she's also got to be sweet. So, Melissa, does this reflect anything in the movies, these soundtracks? Is there any connection there between these opening songs that is different than the songs about the man? Or that says something about the content of the films?
Certainly, John. Yeah, all the songs that are written for the male protagonist movies are always like, you know, like Shaft, you're so bad, you're such a badass, and I guess like you're gonna save the day, look at you go, that kind of thing. And all the women, all these the songs for the women protagonists are always like coffee is the color of your skin, so referencing the body. And then Cleo, like, you talk right, you walk right, you move right. So it's like totally emphasizing the female body as being like such an important agent in crime fighting, apparently. So Cleo has to be tough and sexy. She can't just be tough. And the men can be tough, but, you know, they're going to get the ladies. But in this song we just listened to, Cleo, it's like whoever's singing the song, this man is like kind of saying like, I'm gonna get Cleo. I get Cleo, and like the desert wind or whatever. But it's very much like it's about. It seems like it's about love, like saying like, I love you, Cleo. I love you. I love it. And it's like, I love your body, for the women, and then for the men, it's like this. You just need to be tough. Okay. But for women, you're certainly. And that's why in all the films that you see, like, there's so much nudity. It's all about, you got to be tough, but you also have to show your boobs a little bit, too.
Okay, so, and this is, part of this, I mean, the reason that we're talking about this, right, is that some of these things stick And for some people, this might be, if this is the only thing that you know about black culture, that you might sort of take lessons from these things. And I know that I did that when I was young. This is my only exposure, is that I sort of took lessons from these things, and it creates this impossible standard, right? Kick everyone's ass, but then, look really hot while you're doing it. So, to look at a few of these other songs, like I said, 1973, you really got a saturation point. Everybody wants in. And so this even leads to kind of some awkward attempts to get in. So you've got James Brown, who wants to get on board with the soundtrack, and he makes the soundtrack to Black Caesar. And the album is a bit literal and it's a bit awkward, but the story this song has been sampled by all sorts of rappers. It's James Brown, the boss, pay the cost to be the boss. So you get this, and this is actually not the theme song, so this is just a part of the action. You see how literal these things are. But again, what kind of character are we dealing with here? So I'm going to play James Brown's The Boss.
1, 2, get down. Paid the cost to be the boss. Paid the cost to be the boss. I paid the cost to be the boss. Look at me. You know what to see. See a bad mother. Look at me. You know what to see. See a bad mother. Paid the cost to be the boss. Paid the cost to be the boss. Look at me. Know what to see? See a bad mother. Having fun, got money fun. 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 'Cause I paid the cost to be the boss. Paid the cost to be the boss. Paid the cost to be the boss. Cross the tracks, turned my back, cross the tracks, turned my back. Paid the cost to be the boss. I'm a bad mother. I'm a bad mother. Head for the turnaround. Head for the turnaround.
All right, there we've got The Boss, James Brown from the Black Caesar soundtrack. So then after James Brown is sung, all these big names are on the market. They're trying to get in on it. But after this, even when the films are still making some money, the soundtracks start to slow down a bit. So for the theme song for Foxy Brown, Motown releases the theme song to try to get in on this, but it's with little fanfare. So even though Foxy Brown was very profitable, by this time you can see that sort of the trend is over. And again, just listen to this juxtaposition. She's got to be cute and sweet, but she doesn't play around. So it's this beauty with this kind of toughness, and that's what this movie's about, is this tough but a beauty queen. And by 1975, you get some of these movies are just kind of pretty crazy, but this is sort of one of the last big pictures to hit. And here's the theme of Foxy Brown. I'd like to just plug River West Film and Video right now, though. Come on down. This is a great place to get your videos. We're going to play this song, and then we're going to wind up with some closing comments. So please stick around. Here's the theme to Foxy Brown.
No time for Friday.
Willie Hutch doing the theme from Foxy Brown. This is a Motown record, so everybody tried to get in on it. And so now, as always, every week we get down to what is the point? What is the point of this week's show? So what happens? You've got black and white audiences who are not in a vacuum. So Hollywood recovers. So what happens to these films when they sort of lose their favor? Well, they're still around, but black audiences are going to Jaws, right? Hollywood recovers, and it's really on the back of these low investment, high profit movies. So blaxploitation helps get Hollywood back on its feet, as it were. And then you've got black and white audiences who are going to Jaws, they're going to Star Wars, doing all these things. And you also have some crossover appeal. You get Richard Pryor, and then not very long after this, Eddie Murphy, who have this immense crossover appeal, who are selling to black and white audiences. So the structure of Hollywood is changing, and there was never a black audience in a vacuum. They were going to white movies, and white folks were going to these movies too. So, but what does this narrative do? It works with this genre, and it ends up, it sort of works itself out of the genre, even though it stays there in these black pictures, but it ends up in early hip-hop, and that's really where you find it today. And hip-hop is another episode where we can talk about this, that there's still this kind of ghetto narrative, and it still focuses on these same kind of issues, even maybe more so in the early 90s, late 80s, and that kind of hip-hop. You get this resurgence of the ghetto narrative, and then a whole other set of films. So what's the problem? Well, one is it's often exaggerated, and two, it sort of presents this, even like I said with Curtis Mayfield, someone who's critical of the problems. It gives you this idea that there's nothing good in the hood. That, well, what about black churchgoers? What about the people who are sitting in the backyard celebrating a birthday party and grilling hamburgers, right? What about sitting around the Christmas tree, right? There are things that are going on in ghettos. There are people having fun. There are people living normal day-to-day life and going to work, right? And a big problem here is that this might be the only exposure that some people get. And I can say this for myself, coming from a community that is just basically ostensibly like all white. The music and the movies, this is where I get my idea, and it's not accurate. So when I come to a city, what's the first thing I think? Well, I'm in a black neighborhood. I've seen this before, or I've heard this before. This is where people get shot, right? And who better to tell me than these young black men who are from the ghetto, right, who are telling me that it's like this, right? So That's sort of one of the problems here. And even when the main character is a woman for these songs, it's a man, or for these films, it's usually going to be a man directing, a man writing the songs. So you get this idea of the ghetto. You get this idea of the way that women fit into it. And you get a really simplistic idea of revolution, that if you just kick enough ass, all your problems are solved, rather than thinking it's going to be a continual struggle. You can't kill the drug dealer. You have to get rid of the drugs, etc., etc. And see, these are just some of the problems. Melissa, do you have any final closing comments before we shut down?
I think that's I learned a lot, so thanks a lot for having me.
All right,
John.
well, thank you for coming. Thank you for telling everybody about blaxploitation. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Kyle has showed up, so please stick around and listen to his show. This has been another edition of Say It Loud, Random Slabs of Music History, the show where each week my guests and I talk about a different random piece of music history with your host, as always, John Terry, broadcasting live right down in the middle of Center Street at River West Film and Video. Great place to rent your movies. Come on down. Please tune in next week, Thursday night, 8 o'clock. This is my show. Thank you very much for tuning in. Like I said, Kyle's on the way, so get ready. Thank you. Have a good night, River West.
Howdy.
Hey,
How's it going?
good.